Welcome to the short training course on fraud in the payment industry. This is a free course from Learning Tabs. This course covers the following important topics: Introduction to fraud in the payment industry, types of payment fraud, methods of fraud detection, fraud prevention measures, regulatory frameworks and compliance, responding to payment fraud. Conclusion: mitigating payment fraud. Fraud in the payment industry is a growing concern, and it affects various stakeholders, including merchants, financial institutions, and consumers. Fraud in the payment industry is a significant global issue, with substantial economic impact. Here are some of the latest figures to understand the impact. Economic loss. Payment fraud, including card fraud and online payment scams, costs the global economy billions annually. Losses from online payment fraud alone are projected to exceed $200 billion in 2024 in the Asia-Pacific region. Other regions also face considerable losses. Prevalence of fraud types. Common types of fraud include phishing attacks, first-party misuse, friendly fraud, identity theft, and card-not-present fraud. Phishing has become the most frequent attack globally, affecting 43% of merchants. Friendly fraud, where customers dispute legitimate transactions, is also rising. Impact on e-commerce. E-commerce businesses face significant challenges, with chargebacks and fraudulent orders contributing to revenue losses. For instance, e-commerce fraud globally accounted for about 2.9% of revenue loss in 2023, a slight improvement from previous years. Regional trends. The US accounts for 42% of global e-commerce fraud, primarily due to phishing, card fraud, and increasing cryptocurrency scams. On the contrary, the Asia-Pacific region, despite high digital spending, sees a loss of 5% of revenue annually to fraud. This highlights the importance of adopting robust fraud detection and prevention strategies to mitigate financial and reputational damage. Tools such as behavioral biometrics, device intelligence, and comprehensive fraud management systems are critical for businesses to stay ahead of evolving threats. Introduction to fraud in the payment industry. Fraud has become a significant challenge in today's digital financial world, affecting consumers, merchants, and financial institutions alike. Payment fraud refers to any attempt to deceive or exploit payment systems, resulting in unauthorized transactions or access to sensitive financial information. The consequences are far-reaching, including financial loss, reputational damage, and legal repercussions. In this session, we will explore the types of payment fraud, detection methods, prevention strategies, and best practices to protect against fraud in the payment industry. Types of payment fraud. In this section, we'll review the most common types of fraud in the payment industry. Understanding these types is key to recognizing and preventing fraudulent activities. First, card fraud is one of the most widespread forms. It can occur in two main forms: card not present or CNP fraud, which happens during online transactions when the physical card isn't involved. Example is a fraudster steals credit card information and buys goods from an online store without the cardholder's knowledge. Next is card-present fraud, such as skimming, where fraudsters use devices to capture card details at ATMs or point-of-sale terminals. Example of this type of fraud is a skimming device placed on an ATM records the data on a card's magnetic strip, which is then used for unauthorized transactions. Next case is account takeover, where fraudsters gain access to a customer's account using stolen credentials, often targeting online banking or payment platforms. Example of this type of fraud is a fraudster uses a customer's stolen login information to withdraw funds from their bank account. Next, we have mobile payment fraud. With the rise of mobile banking, fraudsters have become more adept at targeting users through methods like SIM swap fraud, where a fraudster takes control of a customer's phone number to gain access to mobile accounts. Example of this type of fraud is fraudsters impersonate a mobile customer service representative to gain control over a victim's phone number, allowing them to reset passwords and gain access to financial accounts. Malware and phishing attacks also target mobile payment apps to steal sensitive data. Example of this type of fraud is fraudsters send fake alerts or messages urging customers to install malicious apps or click on phishing links that steal payment credentials. In the peer-to-peer, P2P, payment fraud category, fraudsters use social engineering tactics to trick victims into transferring money via apps like Venmo or PayPal. Example of this type of fraud is a fraudster impersonates a buyer or a family member in need, convincing the victim to send money through a P2P app. Finally, synthetic identity fraud is becoming increasingly common. Here, fraudsters use a mix of real and fake data to create new identities, often to open fraudulent accounts. Example of this type of fraud is a fraudster uses a mix of stolen personal data and fictional information to create a new credit card account and make fraudulent transactions. Now let's talk about how we can detect fraud before it causes significant damage. Fraud detection involves using advanced technologies and monitoring practices to spot unusual patterns and behaviors in transactions. Machine learning, ML, and artificial intelligence, AI, are revolutionizing the way we detect fraud. These technologies analyze massive amounts of transaction data in real time, identifying suspicious patterns that would be difficult for humans to detect. For example, AI can flag a transaction that doesn't fit the cardholder's typical spending behavior, such as a purchase in a foreign country shortly after a local transaction. Another key technology is tokenization and encryption. Tokenization replaces sensitive card information with a unique token, ensuring that the real data isn't exposed during transactions. Encryption secures the data, making it unreadable to unauthorized parties. Behavioral analytics tracks how users typically interact with their accounts. By recognizing normal behaviors and detecting anomalies, this method helps flag potential fraud. For instance, if a customer normally shops only in one country but suddenly makes a large purchase in another country, it could trigger an alert for further investigation. Finally, multi-factor authentication, MFA, adds another layer of security. It requires users to verify their identity through multiple methods, such as entering a password, receiving an OTP on their phone, or providing biometric data. By leveraging these fraud detection tools, we can significantly reduce the likelihood of fraudulent transactions. Let's now discuss prevention strategies. Preventing fraud is always better than dealing with the consequences. In this section, we'll discuss several measures to minimize fraud risk. First, secure payment systems like EMV chip technology are critical. EMV, Europay, MasterCard, and Visa chip cards create unique transaction codes, making it nearly impossible for fraudsters to duplicate them, unlike traditional magnetic stripe cards. This significantly reduces counterfeiting. Next, regular monitoring and alerts are crucial for real-time detection. Financial institutions and merchants can set up alerts for transactions that exceed a certain threshold or for irregular purchasing patterns, ensuring quick action in case of suspicious activity. Customer education is another important aspect of fraud prevention. Educating customers about recognizing phishing emails, malicious phone calls, and suspicious links can prevent many types of fraud, especially in online transactions. It's important to keep customers updated on the latest fraud tactics and provide them with tips on how to stay safe. Lastly, secure online payment gateways play a major role. Merchants must ensure they use secure, PCI DSS-compliant payment gateways for processing transactions. This ensures that payment information is encrypted and safely transmitted, reducing the risk of data breaches. By implementing these strategies, we can build a strong defense against payment fraud. Let's explore the regulatory framework that helps enforce these measures. The payment industry is heavily regulated to protect consumers and financial institutions. Compliance with these regulations is essential for preventing fraud and ensuring secure transactions. PCI DSS, or Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, is a critical set of standards established by the Payment Card Industry Security Standards Council. This framework provides guidelines for handling cardholder information securely. Merchants and payment processors must adhere to PCI DSS to prevent data breaches and fraud. Key requirements of PCI DSS are: encrypt sensitive payment data, implement secure authentication mechanisms, maintain secure systems and networks. PSD2, or the Revised Payment Services Directive, is a regulation in the European Union aimed at improving payment security. PSD2 introduces requirements like strong customer authentication, SCA, which mandates that customers provide two forms of identification to authorize payments, adding an extra layer of security. Key features of PSD2 are: strong customer authentication, SCA, requirement. Open banking frameworks for secure sharing of financial data. In addition, GDPR protects consumer data and privacy in Europe. It requires businesses to ensure the secure processing of personal data, including payment details, and gives individuals control over how their data is used. Complying with these frameworks not only helps reduce fraud but also builds trust with customers. Let's now discuss how to respond to fraud when it occurs. Despite all preventive measures, fraud may still occur. It's crucial to respond quickly and effectively to minimize the damage. The first step when fraud is detected is to freeze the account. This prevents any further unauthorized transactions. Next, you should notify the customer immediately to make them aware of the fraud and guide them on how to secure their accounts. Once the account is secure, conduct a thorough investigation to identify how the fraud occurred and whether any other accounts have been compromised. This will help prevent future incidents. Finally, report the fraud to authorities and payment networks. Law enforcement agencies and card networks like Visa and MasterCard can assist in tracking down the fraudster and preventing further fraud attempts. By responding swiftly and efficiently, you can reduce the impact of payment fraud on both the business and the customer. Let's wrap up by reviewing the key points we've covered. To conclude, payment fraud is a serious threat to the financial ecosystem, but it can be managed with the right tools, techniques, and strategies. By understanding the types of fraud, implementing fraud detection and prevention measures, and complying with regulatory frameworks, businesses and consumers can significantly reduce the risk of fraud. It's important to stay vigilant, constantly monitor transactions, educate customers, and ensure systems are secure. Remember, preventing fraud is a collective effort involving everyone in the payment ecosystem. Keep learning at Learning tabs. Thank you for completing this training on fraud in the payment industry. Stay informed, stay secure, and together, we can help protect the financial system from fraud.